Chapter 26. Traveling through the Vale. Something was going on in the castle. I could feel it in the air. Most of the major lords in the Vale were hurriedly leaving the area. I believed Lord Arryn had secretly ordered his most trusted bannermen to prepare for the coming storm. I knew Jon Arryn understood that war was imminent and was already making his moves. History would record that it was he who would first defy the Mad King and call his banners. Well, it was 282 AC, and while conflict brewed, I was not yet swept up in its current. I intended to use the time I had in the Vale wisely. Thus, I found myself traveling with the departing lords, Lord Royce, Lord Redfort, and Lady Anya Waynwood, alongside her son and heir, Morton. They had extended the invitation, and I saw no strategic reason to refuse. We packed our gear for the ride to their castle, Ironoaks. Morton and I got along well. He was a solid sparring partner, hungry to learn new techniques and drills. We spoke of arms and armor, of the different fighting styles we had encountered across the kingdoms, and of the responsibilities of knighthood. His younger brother, Donal, was getting along famously with my men. He confessed his envy that my subordinates had already seen 4 of the 7 kingdoms in the capital itself. Lady Anya Waynwood observed the journey from her carriage, occasionally engaging me in conversation through the window. I spoke with her of the Queen of Thorns, of how House Tyrell had used my talents for entertainment and then threatened me when I was no longer of immediate use. I shared a few carefully chosen anecdotes about Olenna Tyrell's sharp tongue, which drew a measured laugh from the Lady of Ironoaks. Lady Anya was a shrewd politician, and I could see she appreciated discerning conversation. Speaking frankly about the follies of other lords, like the Tyrells, seemed to amuse her and build a rapport based on a shared understanding of Southron politics and the ambitions of great houses. I sometimes glanced at Morton, who was deep in conversation with Rick. I had entrusted one of my swords to Rick, and he was explaining its balance and make to the young heir, who examined it with a keen, appreciative eye. He seemed entirely focused on the blade, paying no mind to my discussion with his mother. I returned my attention to our conversation about the political landscape of the Reach. This was a woman who had been widowed twice and had chosen to rule alone thereafter. It was a rare path, one that spoke of formidable will. Perhaps she felt isolated, the weight of command distancing her from her own family. I could see a certain formal distance between her and her sons, who were preoccupied with martial pursuits and the pursuit of their own glory. When the conversation allowed, I ventured a polite question about her house's history. The answers painted a picture of a woman who had fought hard to maintain her family's position, a struggle I could respect. I also spoke with Morton alone. It became clear he chafed under his mother's regency. He was a man grown with heirs of his own, yet he remained the heir, not the Lord of Ironoaks. He confided his frustration, believing others looked down on him for lingering in his mother's shadow. I understood the sting of that. However, it was also evident that Morton's talents lay more in martial vigor than in political cunning. He made decisions too openly, trusted too readily, a potential liability for a ruling lord. That, I suspected, was the true reason Lady Anya kept a firm hand on the reins. I told him I would be a neutral ear for both sides if ever needed. Her other son, Donal, squired for his brother and dreamed of earning a white cloak as a Knight of the Gate, the highest honor in the Vale. He dedicated nearly all his time to training. With her youngest son fostered far away for years to come, and a daughter-in-law she seemed to have little in common with, I began to understand the unique isolation of her position. I made a mental note to tread carefully. Becoming entangled in the internal dynamics of a major Vale house was a dangerous game. We had ridden for nearly a full day on the mountain roads. As night fell, we made camp. We prepared a chicken roast over the fire, and I broke out some of the fine wine Robert had given me. It made for a pleasant evening. We did not consider that a fire, while warding off beasts, could also draw more dangerous predators. I woke in my tent, a primal instinct screaming of danger. I shook the 2 squires dozing at my tent entrance awake. I would have to address their negligence later. Rick, Colt, up, now. Rouse the others and arm yourselves. They jolted into action. Peering into the darkness, I could make out shapes moving in the woods, 30, maybe 40 men, closing in on our camp. This was bad. The Waynwood party had 25 souls, but only 18 were fighters, the rest were servants and maids. Ambush! I roared, my voice cutting through the night. I was still shirtless, having grown accustomed to sleeping without the constriction of armor. There was no time to rectify that now. I saw the Waynwood guards scrambling into a defensive perimeter around Lady Anya's tent, with Esser Morton at their center. The battle was joined. I was impressed by their swift response. They were on their own lands and clearly expected such threats. But why attack us now? If this was meant for me, I could only speculate about darker forces at play. I knew the three-eyed raven held sway over those with the blood of the first men. While I could navigate the machinations of Varys, the raven's motives were an enigma. Was this a test? Or was I simply being paranoid, and this was merely a well-armed mountain clan seizing an opportunity? It didn't matter. The time for thought was over. I stepped forward and brought my sword across in a wide, horizontal slash. The edge caught the first clansman in the neck and bit deep into the shoulder of the man beside him before I wrenched it free. They fell, choking and bleeding, into the dirt. My men closed ranks beside me, their own blades rising and falling with disciplined fury. Within moments, a dozen clansmen lay dead or dying at our feet. The Waynwoods were not faring as well. I saw several of their guards already slain. I barked orders to my men. Rick, Claw, Alfie, Morty, support Sir Morton. Hale, Colt, get the wounded to cover. Now. They moved as one. I fought my way across the camp, my sword a blur. I felt like a force of nature, my body moving with a lethal grace I still found disconcerting. I counted 20 fallen before I circled back to the main tent. One detail struck me as I fought. None of these raiders appeared younger than 25. They had sent their best, their strongest. This was no mere raid for plunder. When I reached the tent, the scene was grim. Nearly all the Waynwood guards were down. Morton was on the ground, bleeding heavily. One of my men was also down, and another, Morty, was howling, clutching his ruined left eye. Only 4 of my subordinates and 2 guards remained, locked in combat. Rick was dueling a massive, ugly brute who wielded a fine sword with a Damascus pattern. The leader. A cold fury settled over me. Death would be too kind. I charged, and with a swift, precise blow from the flat of my blade, I dashed the leader's brains against his skull, dropping him unconscious. I would have answers from him later. Seeing their champion fall, the remaining raiders broke and fled, only to be cut down as they ran. I surveyed the carnage. The sight of the dead was becoming grimly familiar. Rick stood panting, the 2 surviving guards looking shell-shocked. Rick, see to Colt's bleeding. You, sirs, get Morton's armor off and put pressure on his wounds. Hale, get Morty into the tent. A scream tore from inside the tent. Alfie. Claw. With me. We burst inside to find 2 clansmen who had slit the canvas from the rear. Servants lay dead around them. One had a grip on Lady Anya, the other held Donal. Another step and I snap her neck. The first snarled. Claw didn't give him the chance. A dagger flashed through the air and buried itself in the man's forehead. As he crumpled, I caught Lady Anya before she fell. I turned my gaze to the second man. Your options are simple. Harm the boy and die in agony, or run and keep your life. He was a coward. He chose to run, scrambling back toward the slit in the tent. A nod from me was all Claw needed. He retrieved his dagger and sent it spinning into the man's back before he could take 3 steps. Of all my men, Claw was the most ruthlessly efficient. He had mastered my knife fighting lessons, and I had gifted him a black steel dagger for his prowess. Its value had just been proven beyond measure. My lady, are you injured? I asked, steadying her. She was trembling but composed. Yes, I am unharmed. You have my thanks, Sir Julius, for my life and my son's. Then her eyes fell upon the dead servants, and the composure broke. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing against my chest. A moment later, she pushed back, urgency in her eyes. Morton, where is my son? He is wounded, my lady, but the injury is not mortal. He will live. At my words, she and Donal rushed outside. We followed. She was kneeling beside Morton, her tears falling on his face. He was unconscious, but the guards had competently staunched the flow of blood. I turned to my own. Colt was out cold, a deep gash across his back. Hale was already cleaning the wound. Morty sat nearby, a bloody cloth pressed to his eye. He had lost it. I could see the pain etched on his face. Rick, did you clean his wound? I asked. Sir. Used the strong wine. Good. I knelt before Morty. Can you hear me, lad? He looked up with his one good eye, jaw clenched. Sir. I lost an eye, not my ears. Despite everything, I felt a grim smile touch my lips. That's the spirit. That sharp tongue is all we need. Don't fret, a maester will see you right. Through the rest of the night, we gathered the dead and burned them. The clan leader did not survive our interrogation. By morning, his suffering was over. At first light, I sent the 2 surviving Waynwood guards ahead. Ride hard to Iron Oaks. Bring back a maester and more men. They hesitated, looking at their wounded liege. I swear to you, by my honor, I will protect your lady and her sons with my life, I vowed. They sought and received a confirming nod from a pale but resolute Lady Anya, then galloped away. We salvaged what supplies we could. We placed Morton, the unconscious colt, and the stoic Morty into the carriage with Donnell. Alfie would drive. That left Lady Anya to ride, and she joined me. My poor horse, Stormwind, would have to bear the extra weight. Sorry, old friend, I murmured, and he snorted in response, as if in resignation. And so we moved on, a battered and bloodied party, with Lady Anya guiding us along the mountain path toward the safety of her walls. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 27. Lady of the Iron Oaks. Anya Wainwood Pav. I have served my house for almost 20 years as its head, and I have served it well. I was my father's only child, and after my mother died, he never remarried. I was raised to rule, not to be sold off as a broodmare to another house. I married my cousin, Hawthor. It was no grand political match, but we loved each other, and our family approved. He fought in the War of the Ninnepenny Kings as my father's squire. My father died in that war, and Hawthor earned his knighthood. My uncle, Rabar, who was also my good father, arranged our marriage to secure the line of succession. I did my duty, and our union brought me 2 sons. But nothing lasts forever. My husband died in an ambush set by one of the notorious mountain clans, the Howlers, along with 10 good knights. We also lost the Valyrian steel sword our ancestors had left behind. I asked Lord Arryn for retribution, but we all knew our knights held no power deep in the mountains. All I could do was mourn. Bound by duty, I could not raise my sons as I wished, and the distance between us grew. Then a plague took our mining village. The miners and their families all died. We sealed the village to contain it, a grim necessity. The iron mine was our primary source of income. Without the miners, we faced financial ruin. We couldn't simply hire farmers, mining is a skilled trade. The neighboring lords would not part with their own. Only the Westerlands had a surplus. I contacted Lord Tywin Lannister. I knew he would only give us men who had served the Rhines and Tarbecks. The price was exorbitant. I married again, for political reasons. My uncle arranged my marriage to a Gulltown Arryn, who provided the gold we needed. I married the sickly Artos Arryn. He died the morning after our bedding, but he had done his duty. He was a kind man. His death spawned vile rumors. Lord Arryn used his authority to crush them before they could spread. For that, he has my house's eternal loyalty. Time passed. I left my sons in the care of my uncle, Rabar. He handles most of my house's duties, but he is not getting younger. Most of my time was spent attending Lord Arryn's court, where I gained influence and could be called a friend of Jon Arryn. Then a new crisis emerged. My son and heir, married only a year, began trying to undermine me. I know it is his wife's whispers. I never planned to rule forever, I intended to step down within a year. But my house was at its weakest, and I needed to find a loyal and capable knight to replace Uncle Rabar. To find a new captain for my household guard, I attended the tourney at Harrenhal with Lord Arryn. A tourney that Grand would surely have worthy candidates. I needed a good swordsman, for horses are useless against the mountain clans. A skilled man could become a master at arms and train my guards. I watched the melee and found him. He fought with formidable skill, like the legendary winged knight himself, defeating opponent after opponent. Even Lord Yohn Royce fell to him. But I lost interest when he brawled with Lord Baratheon. At the feast, I saw the knight of the winged helm again. He was a different man at night, elegant, tall, and composed. I asked my bored eldest son to meet him. Morton had few friends, perhaps he could make one. I inquired about this knight, but found little. The competition for his favor was fierce. Even Lord Arryn was interested. I was pleased to see my son join a drinking contest with Sir Julius Harlane and Lord Baratheon. He was making his own connections. But the foreign knight was more than a drinker and fighter. His singing voice could match Prince Rhaegar's. How could one man be so accomplished? He was an enigma. When I danced with Lord Arryn, Sir Julius approached and asked me for a dance. I was surprised but accepted. I know I have passed the prime of my beauty, but the gesture was courteous. My son, Morton, joined the joust and was defeated by a knight from House Bracken. Sir Julius, I learned from Olenna Tyrell, had been the champion at Highgarden but did not join the lists at Harrenhal. A curious decision. The tourney ended poorly. Lord Arryn wished to return to the Vale with haste. The other Valarlords departed, and Sir Julius joined our contingent. My son told me the knight wished to see the Vale. Morden spoke highly of him and his advice. I was glad my son had found a friend of such caliber. I was also grateful for Sir Julius's company on the road. He was a remarkable entertainer, his tales of distant lands captivating everyone. His friendship with Lord Baratheon was a boon to our travels. We were delayed by my carriage, which sparked an argument with Morden. He was right, the roads were growing more dangerous. The mountain clans were bold, and our guard was small. I proposed a solution to my son. We should invite Sir Julius to Ironokes. Morden agreed enthusiastically. We extended the invitation. The knight accepted with chivalrous grace. I would be honored to ensure the safe passage of the Lady of Ironokes and her son, he said. The journey was engaging. Sir Julius traveled with 6 young men. He had knighted his 2 previous squires at Harrenhal, and these new ones were just as impressive. They possessed the skill to best veteran knights. My son could not defeat 3 of them together. His ability to train them was remarkable. Then the mountain clans attacked in the night. Morden was injured. Donal, though physically unharmed, was shaken, refusing to leave his brother's side. My trusted servants were dead. But the savages were all dead, and Sir Julius had ensured it. I saw their chief die. His end was brutal, but it was justice. Sir Julius then presented me with the sword he had taken from the clan leader. My breath caught. It was my house's lost Valyrian steel blade, the last wielded by my husband. Such a treasure is beyond price. He could have kept it by right of conquest. When I asked why he did not, he replied plainly, "My lady, this is the legacy of House Waynwood. It belongs with you and your sons. I am a guest in your land, it would be a poor repayment of your hospitality to claim your heritage. Besides, I value the friendship I have found here more than any sword." His words were direct and honorable. I was struck by his integrity. I had schemed to recruit him, and in return, he had saved my family and returned our greatest treasure. The debt was immense. I would need to speak with my uncle. 2 of my guards had survived. On Sir Julius's counsel, I sent them to Ironokes to fetch Uncle Rabar, Maester Lomas, and reinforcements. We resumed our travel. My carriage was unusable, so Sir Julius offered me a place on his horse. It was a practical solution. The gesture reminded me of riding with my father long ago. I was sick with worry for Morden, but Sir Julius assured me his head wound would heal with rest. The way he had treated the injury was surprisingly proficient. He will wake when his body is ready, he said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. His confidence was a comfort. I found myself leaning against his back for stability. He kept one arm positioned carefully across my middle to secure me, his grip firm and impersonal. He was not wearing his armor. Sir Julius, I asked, why have you not donned your plate? We can wait. He did not turn his head. It would be in poor shield for you, my lady. The steel would cause you more harm than any stray arrow on this safe stretch of road. My sword is enough. It was a practical, thoughtful answer. A moment later, the horse stumbled on a loose stone. My grip slipped, and his securing arm tightened instantly, preventing a fall. It was a firm, clinical grasp, nothing more. You have my thanks, Sir, I said. Of course, my lady, he replied, his voice even. His gaze stayed fixed on the path ahead, his posture alert to every sound in the surrounding woods. He was a man completely absorbed in his duty. In that moment, I saw the same qualities Lord Arryn and my son valued in him. A straightforward honor, a focus on his word and his task that made the flattery and schemes of other knights seem childish. 3 comments 0 vote. Chapter 28. The Oath of Ironokes. The path ahead was our only concern. My focus remained on the tree line, the sounds of the forest, and the safety of the woman riding behind me. We rode ahead of the main party for a practical purpose, to scout the route and ensure it was clear of further ambushes. A tight, wounded group was a vulnerable one. After a while, I spotted a waterfall a safe distance from the road. We'll check the water source, I told Lady Anya. The wounded will need fresh water for their wounds. She simply nodded, the tension from our earlier conversation seeming to have faded into a weary acceptance of my diligence. At the waterfall, I dismounted and helped her down. I scouted the perimeter, my hand on my sword, finding nothing but the chatter of birds and the rush of water. Only then did I fill our waterskins. Lady Anya sat on a large rock, the spray misting her face. She looked more at peace than I had seen her since the ambush. We should return, I said after a short time. The Maester will need this. Of course, she replied, her voice steady. Thank you, Sir Julius, for your vigilance. 2 days later, the relief force from Ironokes found us. At its head was an old knight, Esser Rabar Waynwood, alongside Maester Lomas and 50 mounted knights. The Maester immediately began tending to Morton, Colt, and Morty, offering quiet praise for the initial field treatments. Esser Rabar approached me, his back straight despite his years. Esser Julius Harlane, he said, his voice gravelly but firm. You have the gratitude of House Waynwood. For my family's lives, and for the return of our legacy. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, held mine. He saw his niece riding under my protection, and his gaze held no suspicion, only a deep, measured respect. He saw a knight who had done his duty, nothing more and nothing less. Morton had woken a day prior and was already back in the saddle, his resilience impressive. When Lady Anya presented him with the recovered Valyrian steel sword, he stared at it in disbelief before his composure broke. He embraced me, his grip strong. A debt of blood and steel, he said, his voice thick. I will not forget this. My man Morty, now bearing the nickname, the One-Eye, with defiant pride, was already holding court with the new knights, weaving a grand tale of our skirmish. Colt, still confined to the carriage, was enduring the good-natured teasing of his comrades, who had dubbed him, Colt Backslash. As we rode into the heart of Waynwood lands, the presence of more villages and patrols spoke of a stable and well-ruled domain. The people we passed looked healthy and their fields were well tended. At Ironoaks Castle, we were formally given guest right. That night, Lord Morton and Lady Anya held a feast. It was a genuine, public declaration of gratitude. Morton's demeanor toward me had solidified into a firm, brotherly respect. The following days were spent productively. I sparred with Morton, who was eager to test his family's blade. My squires worked with the castle guards, drilling them in new formations that, after initial resistance, began to show clear improvement. I accompanied Esser Rabar on a tour of their iron mines. I offered suggestions on shoring up tunnels and improving drainage to prevent collapses and flooding. He listened with a skeptic's ear, which I respected. But as the practical benefits became clear, his skepticism turned to thoughtful consideration. Eventually, he broached the subject directly. You have given my house a new future, Esser Julius. What is it you seek in return? Name your price. I seek no price, Esser Rabar, I replied. I was asked to provide safe escort, and I did. The return of your sword was a matter of honor, not a bargaining chip. If my advice is useful, that is its own reward. When I have lands of my own, perhaps we can trade your iron for my goods at a fair rate. That is all the future payment I would ask. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. He found no guile. A man's worth is in his word and his deeds, he said finally. Yours are both sound. He then did something I did not expect. Before the assembled household, he made a vow. From this day, let it be known that House Waynwood holds Esser Julius Harlane and his line as a sworn ally. If he has need, we will answer. It was not a debt to be called in, but an oath of friendship. It was worth more than any chest of gold. In the quiet days that followed, I also spoke with Lady Anya. Our conversations were of governance and the burdens of leadership. I saw the weariness in her eyes, the weight of 2 decades of rule. A lord who rules alone is like a single pillar, I told her one evening. Strong, but brittle. A lord who rules with the support of his family is like a foundation, unshakable. She heard the wisdom in the words. Shortly after, in a quiet ceremony, she formally passed the lordship to Morton. The relief on her face was palpable. She began to bridge the distance with her good daughter and took visible joy in her grandson, Roland. The very air in Ironoaks felt lighter. A few weeks later, with the household secure and its new lord settled, I went to Morton with a final piece of counsel. The Howlers are bloodied, but not broken. They will return. To secure your people for a generation, you must not just defend. You must eradicate the threat. The new lord of Ironoaks did not hesitate. A raven was sent to the Eyrie, seeking Lord Aaron's leave to call his banners. The reply came the next day. Permission was granted. Lord Morton Waynwood stood before the high table in his hall, his ancestral sword at his hip, and gave the order that would define the beginning of his rule. Call the banners. 2 comments 0 vote. Chapter 29. The Mountain Plan. Call the banners, Lord Morton had said. And so the riders went out from Ironoaks. I knew why I had suggested this course. Every member of this family carried a deep-seated hatred for the mountain clans, a burning need to avenge the late Esser Hawthor. They had lacked the permission, the opportunity, and the right strategy. Now, they had all 3. A war council was called. I laid out my plan. We do not need to risk the knights House Waynwood can muster. We will raise a new force from the small folk. I explained my reasoning. Knights were less effective in the mountains, where their horses were a liability. While skilled with a sword, their true value would be in the open field battles of the war one knew was coming. Losing a knight here would be a strategic waste. A trained infantry, however, would be perfect for the terrain and could be raised without depleting the house's core strength. I assured Morton, even if the expedition meets resistance, your house's power remains intact. I will lead the new foot soldiers into the mountains. You and your household knights will secure our supply lines and flanks. He protested immediately. This is my fight, Julius. I should lead. It is your fight, which is why you cannot fall to a stray arrow in some rocky pass, I countered. If a new lord dies on a minor campaign, the other lords will call it folly, not glory. If we succeed, the victory is yours. The command is merely a practicality. Esser Rabar and Lady Anya saw the wisdom. With their support, Morton reluctantly agreed. I set new rules for recruitment. Only one man per family could join. If he was the sole provider, he was turned away. This prevented a single death from crippling a household. We sent half the volunteers home, keeping our force to 1,000 men. We would not risk a backlash that could break the small folks' spirit. We began their training with wooden swords and drills in their own clothes. House Waynwood had 500 gambesons in its armory. We commissioned 500 more from Gulltown, along with 600 swords and helmets. Breastplates would be forged in the local town. The shipment would arrive in a month, giving us time to train the men before equipping them fully. The cost was significant. Some of Morton's kin and the maester voiced their protests. Raising a peasant levy was far more expensive than mustering knights, who equipped themselves. I took Lady Anya aside. Why do you think Lord Arryn granted this permission now, when he denied it for years? He once preferred negotiation. Why sanction a war now? She was a shrewd politician. Understanding dawned in her eyes. She spoke privately with Morton and Esser Rabar about Lord Arryn's recent behavior and what it might portend. After that, all protests about the cost ceased. They understood this was more than a punitive raid, it was a preparation. The preparations for the subjugation of the Howlers began in earnest. My days were filled with drilling the new recruits alongside Morton, his knights, and my men. It was demanding, purposeful work. One evening, a maid approached me in the yard. She was older, with a kind but weary face, and introduced herself as Mesa, the head maid. Esser Julius, she said, her voice low. Might I have a word? Of course. We stepped into a quieter corner of the courtyard. She hesitated, then spoke plainly. I served Lady Anya's husband. I know what it is to lose a man to the clans. What you are doing, giving us a chance to finally answer for Esser Hother, it means more than you know to those of us who remember. She looked at me, her gaze direct and sincere. The people see you not as a foreign knight, but as the sword arm of our justice. Thank you. She left as quietly as she came. Her words were a better reward than any feast. It was a reminder that this campaign was not just about strategy or future alliances, but about real people and a long overdue reckoning. The following week, the weapons and armor from Gulltown arrived. The training yard filled with the sound of hammers and the smell of fresh leather as the men were finally equipped. They stood straighter, their movements more confident with steel in their hands and padded cloth on their backs. Lord Morton stood beside me, watching them drill. They look like soldiers, he said, a note of pride in his voice. They are, I replied. And soon, they will have their chance to prove it. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 30. The Mountain Campaign. I woke at dawn in the guest chambers of Ironoaks. The previous day, the final shipment from Gulltown had arrived. Today, we would march. My thoughts turned to the capital. 6 months had passed with no word from Alban, Alaric, or the others. The helplessness of not knowing their fate was a constant weight. In a world where only lords and maesters commanded the ravens, everyone else was left in the dark. I could only trust in Miranda's capability and the skills of my men to see them to safety. A firm knock sounded at my door. It was Esser Rabar. The men are assembled in the yard, Esser Julius. They await your word. I will be there directly. I armored myself with practiced efficiency. When I arrived in the main yard, the 1,000 strong stood in ordered ranks, their new gambesons and helmets making them look like a true army. Lord Morton, Lady Anya, and Esser Rabar stood on the steps. Morton addressed them. Men of the Vale. Today, we bring justice to the mountains. For every traveler robbed, for every life taken, for Esser Hother. You march under the command of Esser Julius Harlane. He has trained you. Now, follow him to victory. I stepped forward, my voice carrying across the silent yard. You are no longer farmers and miners. You are soldiers. The mountains are harsh. The enemy knows them better than you. But you have discipline. You have numbers. You have steel. Remember your training, watch your brother's back, and trust in your commanders. Our goal is to break the Howlers, strengthen secure these lands for your families. For the Vale. A roar answered me. I turned to Morden and his family. Lady Anya's expression was grim but resolute. The seven keep you, Sir Julius, she said, her voice low. I will return with their surrender, my lady. With that, we marched out of Ironoaks, a column of steel and determination snaking its way toward the foothills. The strategy was simple but risky. We divided into 20 companies of 50 men, each led by 5 of Morden's knights. My squires were distributed among them to gain experience. A large force would only scare the clans into hiding. Smaller, mobile groups could probe their defenses, force engagements, and locate their stronghold. We would maintain contact with smoke signals. The mountains were merciless. The real enemy was not the clansmen, but the terrain itself. Narrow paths gave way to sheer drops. Clean water was scarce. Men were lost to falls and sickness before a single arrow was loosed. The Howlers were cunning. They used the landscape perfectly, launching ambushes from cliffs and vanishing into caves. We lost 2 entire companies in the first week, overwhelmed in narrow passes. I realized our vulnerability. Shoot down every bird you see near the camp. I ordered. The men were confused, but they obeyed. Soon, our pots held crow and hawk. The perfectly timed ambushes ceased. They had been using watchers. A month into the campaign, the Howlers massed their strength and overran the 6th Company. Claw and 10 men fought their way out and found my group days later, battered but alive. We set a trap, and they walked into it. My company was ready. The fight was short and brutal. We captured a score of their warriors, including several women who had fought as fiercely as the men. That evening, I heard ugly noises from where the prisoners were held. I found a group of soldiers harassing the captive women. Enough. My voice cut through the din. The men froze. They are prisoners of war, not spoils. Any man who touches them will answer to me. Is that understood? A veteran knight stepped forward. Sir, with respect, these savages have done worse to our people for generations. And that makes us what? Their equals in savagery. I looked at each man. We are here to bring law, not to become lawless. They will be treated with basic decency. That is my command. Grudgingly, the men stood down. I posted my own squires as guards. From the prisoners, we learned the location of their main village, a fortified cave system deep in the mountains. We consolidated our remaining forces and marched. The stronghold was impressive, a natural fortress with a narrow entrance that allowed only a few men to pass at a time. A perfect defensive position. I approached the entrance alone, my voice echoing against the stone. People of the Howlers. By the order of Lord Morden Waynwood, you are called to answer for your crimes. Your warriors are defeated. Surrender now, bend the knee, and you will be shown mercy. Harm will come to no one. You have until dawn to decide. Refuse, and we will have no choice but to take this fortress by force. Silence was the only reply. As I turned to leave, an arrow shattered against my backplate. I turned slowly. A woman stood at the cave mouth. She was tall and powerfully built, with wild, fiery hair, gripping a stone hammer. She was clad in animal hides, her face smeared with dirt, but her eyes burned with defiance. Claw moved to my side. That's her, Sir. The one who led the attack on our companies. I assessed her. She carried herself with the authority of a leader, her strength evident. We stood, our gazes locked in a contest of wills across the rocky pass. Finally, she spoke, her voice rough but clear. I am Morna, daughter of the last chief you killed. We do not kneel to valley lords. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 31. The Mountains Surrender. She spoke with a defiant arrogance that echoed in the narrow pass. Leave this place, knight, or it will become a grave for you and your men. I studied her, this wild-haired woman clutching a stone hammer. Her bravado was impressive, but it ignored the reality of her situation. Unfortunately, we cannot leave until our task is complete, I replied, my voice even. Are you the chief of the Howlers? I am Morna, daughter of the previous chief, Ulf. I am not the chief. State your terms and leave. Her words were blunt, devoid of any diplomatic grace. I wondered what gave her such confidence in the face of certain defeat. I am Sir Julius Harlane, commander of this expedition for House Waynwood. My terms are simple. Surrender, bend the knee to Lord Waynwood, and no one will be harmed. Your people will be spared. Refuse, and we will have no choice but to take this fortress by force. You have until dawn to decide. We do not lay down our weapons to anyone. We do not kneel to your coward lord. She shouted, her knuckles white on her hammer's grip. We will settle this now. A fight to the death. Tell your men to leave if you fall. It was a desperate, foolish challenge. A duel would be a swift resolution, I acknowledged. But you have already said you are not the chief. You do not have the authority to make such a decision for your entire clan. And I would prefer to settle this with your chief, not through combat with a woman. My words, meant to be pragmatic, struck a nerve. With a furious cry, she lunged, her hammer swinging in a wide arc. I sidestepped the blow, caught her arm as she stumbled past, and pinned her to the ground with a controlled motion. She struggled fiercely against my grip. Stop. Please, do not hurt her. A new voice, cracked with age, rang out. An old woman emerged from the cave mouth, leaning on a cane, a group of wide-eyed boys behind her. We surrender. We want no more bloodshed. Finally, someone who saw reason. As she drew closer, I recognized the sharp, knowing look in her eyes. This was the ward, the mind that had guided the birds and orchestrated the ambushes. Her presence explained much. With her authority, true negotiations began. The clan would surrender and swear fealty. We sent a rider to fetch Lord Warden, a journey that would take a week. In the days that followed, I used the time to understand these people and their home. The stronghold was a marvel of natural defense, well hidden and easily protected. They lived off the land, hunting and foraging. The land itself was rich with resources, a fact I noted for Morton's future plans. I learned from the old woman, named Morag, that the chieftain I had killed months ago was her son. He had usurped and murdered the previous chief, Ulf, using the very Valyrian steel sword I had returned to Lady Anya. He had ruled as a brute for a decade, with Morag serving as the true strategist. She had raised Morna after the girl's father was killed. It explained the young woman's fierce loyalty and lack of political subtlety. With their surrender, we shared our food supplies, and they showed us their hidden water sources. The initial tension eased. Some of my soldiers even began forming tentative bonds with the clansfolk, a few even speaking of marriage. It was an unexpected but welcome development. When Morton arrived with Maester Lomas, his satisfaction was palpable. He was making history as the first Valarlord in memory to successfully subjugate a mountain clan. The ceremony was conducted with solemnity. The remaining clanspeople knelt and swore oaths of fealty to House Waynwood. To ensure their loyalty, Morton would take half of their children as wards, a common practice. On my council, he agreed to invest in the region, building a keep for his younger brother, Donal, and constructing a road to connect the territory to his own. Many of the soldiers who had fought here chose to stay and settle the land. To cement the new peace, a marriage was arranged between Donal and one of Morag's granddaughters. They would form a new branch house, Waynwood of the Howlers. 5 knights would remain to keep the peace. The campaign was over. Our task was complete. Tomorrow, we would march for home. But first, I looked forward to a proper wash. 1 comments 0 vote. Chapter 32, The Mountains Challenge. The cold mountain water was a blessing after weeks of dust and grime. I stood beneath the waterfall, letting the spray wash away the remnants of the campaign. The Howlers' stronghold lay quiet behind me, the tension of the past weeks finally giving way to an uneasy peace. My instinct screamed a warning, a heartbeat before the attack. I sidestepped smoothly, the blade hissing through the space where my neck had been. Water splashed as I turned to face my assailant. Morna stood there, chest heaving, my own longsword gripped in her hands. Her wild hair was plastered to her face, and her eyes burned with a fury that the surrender had done nothing to quell. That is not yours to wield, I said, my voice calm despite the sudden adrenaline. I kept my hands at my sides, making no move to attack. And attacking an unarmed man at his bath is not the act of a warrior. It is the act of a murderer. Your words mean nothing. She spat, the sword trembling in her grip. You come here, you kill our men, you force us to kneel. You think a ceremony changes that? It changes everything, I replied, taking a slow step forward. The rock beneath my feet was slick. Your people are alive. Your children will grow. Under Lord Waynwood's protection, you will have food during winter and justice when wronged. The killing is over. Unless you choose to start it again. She lunged, a clumsy, anger-driven thrust. I didn't retreat. I stepped inside the blow, my left hand snapping up to grip her wrist, my right closing on the blade's hilt just above her own hand. I applied pressure, a controlled twist, and the sword clattered to the stone. She was strong, fueled by rage and grief, but I was stronger. I held her fast, not hurting her, but making escape impossible. Let me go. She snarled, struggling against my iron grip. Will you attack me again? I asked, my voice low and firm. She answered with a furious headbutt. I saw it coming and tilted my head, letting her forehead glance harmlessly off my temple. She cried out in pain and frustration. This achieves nothing, Morna. Your chief has surrendered. Your wise woman has agreed to the terms. Your people have chosen life. Why do you choose death? Honor. She screamed, her voice breaking. You speak of honor while you disarm me like a child. My father's honor. The honor of the men you killed. Honor. I released her, pushing her back a step. I gestured to the sword on the ground between us. There is your honor. Pick it up. Let us settle this as warriors, then. Not with a coward stab in the back, but here, now, in the open. If you win, you avenge your father. If I win, this ends. Your defiance ends. For a long moment, she stared at the sword, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The fire in her eyes warred with a dawning, desperate calculation. She knew she could not win. The fight at the cave mouth had proven that. To pick up the blade was to choose a noble, but utterly pointless, death. Her shoulders slumped. The fight drained from her, leaving only a hollowed-out shell of grief. She did not pick up the sword. I will never accept this, she whispered, the words barely audible over the waterfall. You do not have to like it, I said, my tone softening from command to something resembling understanding. You only have to accept that it is reality. Your duty is no longer to a dead father's war. It is to the living. To the children in that cave. Your strength is needed to build, not to destroy. I bent down, picked up my sword, and sheathed it. I then retrieved the thick wool blanket I had brought and tossed it to her. She caught it on instinct, staring at it blankly. You are cold, I said simply. And you smell of a long campaign, as do I. The water is clean. Wash. Grieve for your dead. Then decide what kind of future you will help your people build. I turned my back on her, the wet rock cold beneath my feet. Letting her keep her dignity was more important than watching her cry. Some hurts run too deep for words to touch. As I pulled on my tunic, I heard the splash as she finally moved, followed by the rough sound of scrubbing. Good. Let the water wash away the grime, if not the grief. She'd learn, or she'd break. That was her choice to make, not mine. Peace. We'd won the fight with steel, but the real battle started now, the slow grind of making former enemies into subjects, of turning hatred into grudging tolerance. I'd promised Morden a secured border. I hadn't promised it would be pretty.